The final days of the war were marked by both triumph and sacrifice. Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the U.S. Invincible *, her eyes scanning the tactical display as the human fleet prepared for what could be the decisive battle. The Krithari Dominion, weakened but not defeated, had gathered their remaining forces in a last-ditch effort to crush humanity once and for all. It was a gamble for both sides, a fight that would determine the fate of countless lives. "Admiral," Captain Ryan Mitchell said, his tone urgent. Their flagship, the Vortex Blade *, is moving into position. They're trying to flank us. Laura studied the display carefully, her mind racing through possibilities. The Vortex Blade * was the Krithari's most powerful dreadnought, a symbol of their dominance in the galaxy. Destroying it would deal a crippling blow to their morale. But reaching it wouldn't be easy. It was surrounded by layers of smaller ships, each one ready to defend it at any cost. "We'll use the same strategy as before," Laura said calmly. "Divide and conquer. Squadrons 1 and 2 will create a diversion, while Squadrons 3 and 4 move in from the sides. Once they've thinned out the escorts, we take down the Vortex Blade *. Mitchell nodded, though his expression remained grim. "It's risky, Admiral. If the diversion fails, we'll lose half our fleet." "It's a risk we have to take," Laura replied. Her voice softened slightly as she added, "Trust me, Ryan. We've come too far to back down now." As the plan unfolded, chaos erupted across the battlefield. Human fighters darted between enemy ships, unleashing barrages of plasma torpedoes and laser fire. Explosions lit up the void, their brilliance briefly illuminating the faces of the crew aboard the Invincible *. Despite the odds, the humans held their ground, driven by sheer determination and the leadership of their admiral. When the path to the Vortex Blade * finally cleared, Laura gave the order she had been waiting for. "All units, focus fire on the dreadnought. Take it out." The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Plasma beams tore through the Vortex Blade *'s weakened shields, piercing its hull and igniting fires deep within its core. For a moment, there was silence, a heartbeat of anticipation, before the massive ship exploded in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rippled outward, shaking the Invincible * and sending debris hurtling in all directions. On the bridge, cheers erupted as the crew celebrated the destruction of the Krithari flagship, but Laura remained silent, her gaze fixed on the viewport. The battle wasn't over yet, and she refused to let herself relax until every enemy ship was neutralized. Hours later, the Krithari forces finally surrendered. Their remaining ships drifted aimlessly in space, their crews either dead or too exhausted to fight back. The human fleet moved in cautiously, securing the area and tending to the wounded. It was a victory unlike any other, a turning point in the long and brutal war. As the dust settled, Laura retreated to the memorial wall aboard the Invincible *. She stood quietly, staring at the names engraved on its surface. Each one represented a life lost, a story cut short. She whispered them softly under her breath, ensuring none would be forgotten. "Admiral." Lieutenant Emily Shaw approached her, her voice hesitant. "Command just sent word. The Krithari have agreed to negotiate a ceasefire. This might actually be the end." Laura nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "It's a start," she said quietly, "but the scars of this war will take generations to heal." Shaw hesitated before speaking again. "What happens now? For you, I mean." Laura smiled faintly. "I'll keep doing what I've always done, protecting those who can't protect themselves. There's still work to be done, even in peacetime." As Shaw walked away, Laura turned back to the stars. The weight of leadership still rested heavily on her shoulders, but for the first time in years, there was hope. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, and though the road ahead would be difficult, Laura knew they would face it together. In the end, it wasn't just about winning battles or destroying ships. It was about something greater, The belief that no matter how dark the night, the dawn would always come. And as Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes stood there, gazing out at the endless expanse of space, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The war was over. And though the scars would remain, so would the hope for peace, for unity, and for a brighter future. The destruction of the Critheri supply hub sent shockwaves through both fleets. For the humans, it was a moment of triumph, a rare chance to breathe and regroup after months of relentless battles. But for Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes, the victory felt bittersweet. She stood on the bridge of the U.S. Invincible Asterisk, staring at the tactical display that showed the remnants of the enemy forces retreating into deeper space. The crew around her worked tirelessly to repair damaged systems and assess casualties, but Laura's mind was elsewhere. "Admiral," Captain Ryan Mitchell said softly, approaching her from behind. "The engineers report that repairs are ahead of schedule. We might be ready to move again sooner than expected." Laura nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the viewport. "Good. We'll need every advantage we can get. The Critheri won't stay quiet for long." Mitchell hesitated before speaking again. "You've been pushing yourself hard, Admiral. Maybe it's time to take a step back, even if just for a little while." "I can't afford to stop," Laura replied, her voice firm but tinged with weariness. "Every decision I make affects thousands of lives. If I let my guard down, even for a moment, people die." Mitchell opened his mouth to argue but thought better of it. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just remember, you're not alone in this. We're all here to support you." Laura offered him a small, grateful smile before turning her attention back to the stars. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she had learned to carry it one day at a time. Later that evening, Laura visited the memorial wall aboard the Invincible Asterisk. It was a solemn place, lined with the names of those who had given their lives in the fight against the Critheri. She paused in front of the newest editions, names of brave men and women who had fallen during the mission to destroy the supply hub. Her fingers traced over the engraved letters, each one a reminder of the cost of war. As she stood there, Lieutenant Emily Shaw joined her, limping slightly due to her still healing injury. "I keep thinking about them," Shaw admitted quietly. "The ones we lost. Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" "All the time," Laura confessed. "But then I think about what happens if we don't fight. If we let the Critheri win. Billions would suffer. Worlds would burn. That's why we keep going, no matter how hard it gets." Shaw nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just wish there was another way." "So do I," Laura said softly. "But until we find one, we have to hold on to hope. Hope that someday this war will end. Hope that the sacrifices we've made will mean something." The two women stood in silence for a while, drawing strength from each other's presence. Eventually, Shaw spoke again. "What's next, Admiral? After everything we've done, where do we go from here?" Laura exhaled deeply, her expression thoughtful. "We keep fighting. We push forward, no matter how difficult it gets, and we never forget why we're doing this, for everyone who can't fight for themselves." When they returned to the bridge, the mood had shifted slightly. The crew seemed more focused, their earlier exhaustion replaced by renewed determination. Word of Laura's words had spread quickly, inspiring hope among the ranks. Even in the darkest moments, her unwavering resolve reminded them of what they were fighting for. As the Invincible Asterisk prepared to jump to its next destination, Laura took her place at the center of the bridge. She glanced at the holographic display one last time, committing the positions of the remaining Critheri ships to memory. Each name was a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the larger picture she was trying to understand. "Set course for the next target," she ordered, her voice steady and clear. "Let's finish what we started." The ship hummed with energy as it entered hyperspace, carrying its crew and humanity's hopes toward an uncertain future. Though the road ahead was fraught with danger, Laura Hayes knew one thing for certain. As long as she led with courage and conviction, her people would follow. And together, they would face whatever came next. The briefing room aboard the U.S. Invincible was filled with tense energy as Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes stood at the head of the table. Around her, her senior officers listened intently, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. On the central display, a map of the Critheri supply hub blinked ominously, a potential weak point in the enemy's vast network. "This is our chance," Laura began, her voice steady and commanding. "Intelligence shows that this supply hub is critical to their operations. If we can take it out, we'll cripple their ability to launch further attacks against us." Captain Ryan Mitchell leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "It's heavily guarded, Admiral. Even if we manage to reach it, destroying it won't be easy." Laura nodded, acknowledging the risks. "I know, but we've faced worse odds before. The key is speed and precision. We hit them hard and fast, then get out before they can regroup." Lieutenant Emily Shaw, seated near the back of the room, raised her hand slightly. "What about reinforcements? Our fleet is still recovering from the last battle." "We won't have time to wait for backup," Laura replied. "This opportunity won't last long. If we act now, we can catch them off guard. That's our best shot." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Everyone understood what was at stake. Success could shift the balance of the war in humanity's favor, but failure would leave them even more vulnerable than before. "Here's the plan," Laura continued, tapping the display to zoom in on the target area. "We'll divide into 3 teams. Team 1 will create a diversion near the outer perimeter, drawing their forces away from the hub. Team 2 will disable the defensive turrets using EMP torpedoes. Once the path is clear, Team 3, led by me, will move in to plant explosives at the core of the facility." Mitchell frowned, clearly uneasy about the idea of Laura leading the final assault. "Admiral, I don't think you should be on the front lines for this. It's too dangerous." "I appreciate your concern, Captain," Laura said firmly, meeting his gaze. "But someone needs to oversee the operation directly. Besides, I trust my crew to keep me safe." Her confidence seemed to reassure the others, though Mitchell still looked troubled. After a brief pause, he nodded reluctantly. "Understood, Admiral." With the plan set, the officers dispersed to prepare their teams. Laura stayed behind, staring at the map one last time. She knew the mission was risky, but hesitation wasn't an option. Every second counted. Hours later, the human fleet approached the Critheri supply hub under the cover of darkness. The operation unfolded exactly as planned. At first, Team 1 launched a series of decoy attacks, luring the enemy ships away from the hub. Meanwhile, Team 2 deployed the EMP torpedoes, disabling the defensive turrets with pinpoint accuracy. As the defenses fell, Laura led Team 3 toward the heart of the facility. Inside the supply hub, the air was thick with tension. Laura and her team moved quickly, planting explosives at key points throughout the structure. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the corridors as the diversionary attacks continued outside. Suddenly, alarms blared, startling the group. "They detected us," shouted one of the engineers. "Keep moving," Laura ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're almost done." As the last explosive was set, the team sprinted toward the exit. Behind them, the facility began to collapse, its walls shaking violently. Just as they reached their ship, a massive explosion tore through the hub, lighting up the void like a supernova. Back aboard the Invincible Asterisk, the crew erupted into cheers as they watched the destruction unfold. Laura stood silently on the bridge, her expression unreadable. Victory had come at a cost. Several members of Team 3 hadn't made it back, but the mission had succeeded. For now, the Critheri were weaker, and humanity had gained precious breathing room. As the cheers died down, Laura turned to her officers. "Good work, everyone. But remember, this isn't over." "Not yet." Her words hung in the air, a reminder that the war was far from won. Still, for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope. And in the endless fight for survival, hope was the most powerful weapon of all. Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes sat in her quarters aboard the U.S. Invincible Asterisk, staring at the glowing screen of her datapad. The report she was writing for command felt heavier than any battle plan she had ever devised. Every word carried the weight of what had happened. Every decision, every loss, every moment of triumph and tragedy. She paused, her fingers hovering over the keypad, as memories of the battle replayed in her mind. The door to her quarters slid open, and Captain Ryan Mitchell stepped inside. He looked hesitant, as if unsure whether he was intruding. "Admiral," he said softly, "you've been in here for hours. The crew is starting to worry." Laura glanced up at him, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, Ryan. Just tying up loose ends." Mitchell crossed the room and took a seat across from her. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. We're all here for you." "I know," Laura replied, her voice soft but firm. "But this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who fought out there. I owe it to them to make sure their story is told properly." Mitchell nodded, understanding the unspoken burden she carried. "What happens next?" "After the report." Laura leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to the viewport that showed the endless expanse of space. "Command wants us to regroup and reinforce our defenses. They're sending supplies and reinforcements, but they also want us to prepare for a counteroffensive. The Crithuri won't stay quiet for long." Mitchell frowned. "A counteroffensive? With what? Half our fleet is damaged, and we've lost too many good people already." "I know," Laura admitted, her tone tinged with frustration. "But sitting back isn't an option either. If we let the Crithuri rebuild, they'll come at us harder next time. We need to hit them where it hurts, cut off their supply lines, disrupt their operations, and show them that humanity isn't backing down." Mitchell sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's risky, but I suppose we don't have much of a choice." "No," Laura agreed. "We don't." The two fell silent for a moment, the hum of the ship's engines filling the room. Finally, Mitchell spoke again. "What about the prisoners? The ones we took from the Crithuri ships?" Laura's expression softened slightly. "They're being held securely, but we're treating them humanely. Some of them might even be willing to talk, if we can find a way to communicate effectively." "You think they'll give us useful information?" Mitchell asked skeptically. "It's worth a try," Laura replied. "Every little bit helps. Besides, maybe they'll realize we're not the monsters their leaders made us out to be." Mitchell nodded slowly, though his doubts lingered. "And what about the crew? How do we keep morale up after all this?" Laura smiled faintly. "That's the easy part. People fight for something bigger than themselves. We remind them why we're here, not just to survive, but to protect those who can't fight for themselves. Hope is a powerful weapon, Ryan. As long as we hold on to it, we'll keep moving forward." Mitchell stood up, giving her a respectful nod. "You're right, Admiral. I'll make sure the crew hears that message loud and clear." After he left, Laura returned to her report, her fingers moving steadily across the keypad. When she finally finished, she leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The battle may have ended, but its echoes would linger for a long time. Lives had been lost, sacrifices made, and wounds inflicted that might never fully heal. As she prepared to send the report to command, a sudden alert flashed on her screen. A nearby patrol ship had detected unusual activity near one of the Crithuri's key supply hubs, a weak point in their defenses. Laura's heart raced as she studied the intel. This could be the opportunity they needed to strike back. She tapped the intercom button. Lieutenant Shaw gathered the senior officers in the briefing room. "We've got work to do." When the line went silent, Laura stood up, determination hardening her features. The war wasn't over, and neither was her fight. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, with courage, with strategy, and with hope. The aftermath of the battle was a somber affair. Admiral Laura Hayes stood on the observation deck of the U.S. Invincible Asterisk, gazing out at the vast expanse of space littered with debris. The wreckage of thousands of ships, both human and Critheri, floated silently in the void, a grim reminder of the cost of victory. Rescue pods darted between the remains, searching for survivors, while engineering teams worked to salvage what they could from the damaged vessels. The air on the ship was heavy with exhaustion, but also a quiet sense of relief. They had won, but no one felt like celebrating. Captain Ryan Mitchell approached her, his boots clicking softly against the metal floor. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Admiral," he said, his voice low, "the rescue operations are underway. So far, we've recovered about 200 survivors from the Critheri ships. What do you want done with them?" Laura turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "Put them in holding cells for now," she replied. "Make sure they're treated fairly. No abuse, no mistreatment. They're soldiers, just like us." Mitchell nodded, though his brow furrowed slightly. "Do you think that's wise? After everything they've done?" "It's not about trust," Laura interrupted, her tone firm but calm. "It's about honor. We fight wars because we have to, not because we enjoy it. If we stoop to their level, then we lose sight of who we are." Mitchell didn't argue further. He respected Laura's leadership, even when he didn't fully understand her decisions. With a crisp salute, he left the observation deck to carry out her orders. Laura returned her gaze to the stars, her mind replaying the events of the battle. She thought about the names of the Critheri ships she had memorized: the Asterisk Eternal Flame Asterisk, the Asterisk Iron Tempest Asterisk, the Asterisk Shadow Blade Asterisk. Each one represented lives lost, families torn apart, and worlds destroyed. By naming them, she had tried to give meaning to the chaos, to remind herself that every action carried weight. But now, as the adrenaline faded and the reality of the situation settled in, she couldn't help but wonder if it had been worth it. "Admiral." Lieutenant Emily Shaw's voice broke through her thoughts. Shaw stood at the doorway, her arm still bandaged from her injury. Despite her weakened state, she looked determined, as if refusing to let the battle break her spirit. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Laura asked, turning to face her. "The crew? They're asking about next steps," Shaw said. "What happens now?" Laura sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Now we clean up the mess. We repair our ships, tend to the wounded, and prepare for whatever comes next. This was just one battle, Emily. The war isn't over yet." Shaw nodded slowly, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Do you think we can win? I mean, really win?" Laura didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to a nearby console and pulled up a map of the surrounding star systems. The Critheri Dominion still controlled vast territories, and their resources were nearly limitless. Humanity had struck a significant blow today, but it was only a small step toward ending the conflict. "We'll win," Laura said finally, her voice steady. "Not because we're stronger or smarter, but because we have something they don't: hope. As long as people believe in a better future, we'll keep fighting. That's what makes us different." Shaw seemed to take comfort in those words. She straightened up, her usual confidence returning. "Then I guess we'd better get back to work." As Shaw left the observation deck, Laura remained behind, alone with her thoughts. She glanced down at the list of Critheri ship names she had written on a datapad. One by one, she whispered them aloud, committing each to memory once more. It wasn't just about strategy or tactics. It was personal. Every name represented a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the larger picture she was trying to understand. A soft chime interrupted her reflection. The intercom crackled to life, and a young officer's voice filled the room. "Admiral Hayes, we've received word from command. They want a full report on the battle. And they've promoted you to Fleet Admiral." Laura froze for a moment, the weight of the news sinking in. Promotion meant more responsibility, more decisions, more lives depending on her choices. But it also meant hope, a sign that humanity was willing to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard the road ahead might be. "Thank you," she said into the intercom. "Tell them I'll send the report within the hour." When the line went silent, Laura took a deep breath and stared out at the stars once more. The battle was over, but the war, and its challenges, was far from finished. And as Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes, she knew the hardest fights were yet to come. But Laura wasn't celebrating yet. She stepped closer to the viewport, staring out at the wreckage littering space. Thousands of ships, human and Critheri alike, had been lost in this fight. Billions of lives had been affected by the war, and though the battle was won, the scars would remain for generations. "Signal the fleet," she said quietly. "Tell them to secure the area and begin rescue operations. We save whoever we can." Shaw hesitated before asking, "What about the Critheri survivors?" Laura paused, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "We don't kill unarmed ships. Bring them aboard if they surrender. They're soldiers just like us, fighting for something they believe in." As orders were relayed and the cleanup began, Laura retreated to a quiet corner of the bridge. She stared at the list of Critheri ship names she had memorized, whispering each one softly under her breath. Naming them hadn't just been a tactic, it was a way to acknowledge the cost of war, both for humanity and its enemies. And as she stood there, surrounded by the aftermath of victory, she felt the weight of leadership settle heavily on her shoulders. The battle was over, but the war, and its consequences, would linger long after the fires in space had faded. The final phase of the battle was brutal and chaotic. Admiral Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the U.S. Invincible Asterisk, her eyes locked onto the tactical display as the human fleet pursued the remnants of the Critheri Armada. The once mighty alien forces were now in disarray, their ships scattered and leaderless. But even in defeat, they fought with a ferocity that surprised everyone. Every shot fired, every explosion that lit up the void, reminded the crew of the Invincible Asterisk, that this war was far from over. "Enemy fighters are regrouping near Sector 7, reported an officer from the sensor station. "They're trying to form a defensive line." Laura studied the situation carefully. The Critheri were attempting one last stand, clustering their remaining ships around a heavily damaged dreadnought, the Shadow Blade Asterisk. It was one of the few vessels still capable of mounting a significant resistance. Destroying it would break what little morale the enemy had left, but reaching it wouldn't be easy. Its escorts were laying down heavy fire, forcing the human ships to keep their distance. "We need to split them apart," Laura said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. She turned to Captain Ryan Mitchell. "Order Squadrons 2 and 3 to flank them. Use the debris field for cover." Mitchell nodded and relayed the command. Moments later, two groups of human fighters peeled away from the main fleet, disappearing into the wreckage of destroyed ships that floated silently in the void. The Critheri didn't notice at first, too focused on holding their position. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The flanking squadrons emerged from the shadows, unleashing a barrage of plasma torpedoes that tore through the enemy escorts. "Direct hit," shouted an officer from the weapons station. "Their defensive line is collapsing." Laura wasted no time. "All units, concentrate fire on the Shadow Blade Asterisk. Take it out before they recover." The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Plasma beams and missiles slammed into the dreadnought's weakened shields, pushing it closer to destruction. On the bridge of the Invincible Asterisk, the tension was palpable. Everyone knew how important this moment was. If they failed to destroy the Shadow Blade Asterisk, the Critheri might rally again, prolonging the battle even further. As the assault intensified, Lieutenant Emily Shaw stirred weakly in the medical bay. A medic had patched up her wound, but she was still pale and shaky. Despite her condition, she insisted on returning to duty. "I'm fine," she muttered, brushing off the medic's protests. "The Admiral needs me." When Shaw limped back onto the bridge, Laura glanced at her briefly, concern flickering across her face. "You should be resting," she said firmly. "I'll rest when we win," Shaw replied, taking her seat at the communications console. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the controls, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Admiral, the Shadow Blade engines are failing. They're trying to retreat." Laura's eyes narrowed. "Not on my watch." She tapped a sequence into the console, activating the Invincible main weapon, a massive plasma cannon mounted on its underside. The weapon charged with a low hum, energy crackling around its barrel. When it fired, the beam sliced through space like a lance, piercing the Shadow Blade hull and igniting its reactor core. The resulting explosion was enormous, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. On the bridge, the crew erupted into cheers. The fall of the Shadow Blade marked a turning point. Without their flagship, the Krithari forces crumbled completely. Fighters fled in all directions, some attempting to escape into hyperspace, while others simply drifted aimlessly, their crews surrendering to despair. The final days of the war were marked by both triumph and sacrifice. Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the US Invincible *, her eyes scanning the tactical display as the human fleet prepared for what could be the decisive battle. The Krithari Dominion, weakened but not defeated, had gathered their remaining forces in a last-ditch effort to crush humanity once and for all. It was a gamble for both sides, a fight that would determine the fate of countless lives. "Admiral," Captain Ryan Mitchell said, his tone urgent. "Their flagship, the Vortex Blade is moving into position. They're trying to flank us." Laura studied the display carefully, her mind racing through possibilities. The Vortex Blade was the Krithari's most powerful dreadnought, a symbol of their dominance in the galaxy. Destroying it would deal a crippling blow to their morale. But reaching it wouldn't be easy. It was surrounded by layers of smaller ships, each one ready to defend it at any cost. "We'll use the same strategy as before," Laura said calmly. "Divide and conquer. Squadrons 1 and 2 will create a diversion, while Squadrons 3 and 4 move in from the sides. Once they've thinned out the escorts, we take down the Vortex Blade *. Mitchell nodded, though his expression remained grim. "It's risky, Admiral. If the diversion fails, we'll lose half our fleet." "It's a risk we have to take," Laura replied. Her voice softened slightly as she added, "Trust me, Ryan. We've come too far to back down now." As the plan unfolded, chaos erupted across the battlefield. Human fighters darted between enemy ships, unleashing barrages of plasma torpedoes and laser fire. Explosions lit up the void, their brilliance briefly illuminating the faces of the crew aboard the Invincible *. Despite the odds, the humans held their ground, driven by sheer determination and the leadership of their admiral. When the path to the Vortex Blade * finally cleared, Laura gave the order she had been waiting for. "All units, focus fire on the dreadnought. Take it out." The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Plasma beams tore through the Vortex Blade *'s weakened shields, piercing its hull and igniting fires deep within its core. For a moment, there was silence, a heartbeat of anticipation, before the massive ship exploded in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rippled outward, shaking the Invincible * and sending debris hurtling in all directions. On the bridge, cheers erupted as the crew celebrated the destruction of the Krithari flagship, but Laura remained silent, her gaze fixed on the viewport. The battle wasn't over yet, and she refused to let herself relax until every enemy ship was neutralized. Hours later, the Krithari forces finally surrendered. Their remaining ships drifted aimlessly in space, their crews either dead or too exhausted to fight back. The human fleet moved in cautiously, securing the area and tending to the wounded. It was a victory unlike any other, a turning point in the long and brutal war. As the dust settled, Laura retreated to the memorial wall aboard the Invincible Asterisk. She stood quietly, staring at the names engraved on its surface. Each one represented a life lost, a story cut short. She whispered them softly under her breath, ensuring none would be forgotten. Admiral. Lieutenant Emily Shaw approached her, her voice hesitant. Command just sent word. The Critheri have agreed to negotiate a ceasefire. This might actually be the end. Laura nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. It's a start, she said quietly. But the scars of this war will take generations to heal. Shaw hesitated before speaking again. What happens now? For you, I mean. Laura smiled faintly. I'll keep doing what I've always done, protecting those who can't protect themselves. There's still work to be done, even in peacetime. As Shaw walked away, Laura turned back to the stars. The weight of leadership still rested heavily on her shoulders, but for the first time in years, there was hope. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, and though the road ahead would be difficult, Laura knew they would face it together. In the end, it wasn't just about winning battles or destroying ships. It was about something greater. The belief that no matter how dark the night, the dawn would always come. And as Fleet Admiral Laura Hayes stood there, gazing out at the endless expanse of space, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The war was over. And though the scars would remain, so would the hope for peace, for unity, and for a brighter future. Laura clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay composed. There would be time to grieve later. For now, the battle wasn't over. Though the Critheri were broken, scattered remnants of their fleet were still fighting back, desperate to salvage some semblance of victory. Laura straightened up, her resolve hardening. She turned to Mitchell, who was already barking orders to finish off the remaining ships. We end this now, she said, her voice cold and determined. No survivors. The crew snapped to attention, their exhaustion replaced by renewed determination. The final phase of the battle had begun, and Laura Hayes intended to see it through to the bitter end. The firestorm in the nebula had dealt a heavy blow to the Critheri fleet, but it wasn't enough to end the battle. Admiral Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the US Invincible Asterisk, watching as the surviving enemy ships regrouped beyond the edge of the gas cloud. Their numbers were still daunting, far greater than her own fleet, but the tide had shifted slightly. The humans had proven they weren't an easy target, and that knowledge was beginning to sow doubt among the Critheri commanders. Admiral, Lieutenant Emily Shaw said, breaking the tense silence. Enemy reinforcements are moving into position. They're forming up for another assault. Laura nodded, her eyes scanning the tactical display. The Critheri were reorganizing their forces, clustering around their largest carriers like moths drawn to a flame. These carriers were the backbone of their fleet, capable of launching endless waves of fighters and drones. If they stayed intact, the humans would be overwhelmed sooner or later. Laura knew she had to act quickly. Captain Mitchell, she said, turning to Ryan, prepare a strike team. We need to take out those carriers before they can deploy more fighters. Mitchell hesitated, his brow furrowing. A direct attack on their carriers. That's suicide. Their defenses are too strong. I'm aware of the risks, Laura replied sharply. Her tone softened as she added, but we don't have a choice. If we let them rebuild their strength, we'll lose this fight. Trust me, I've got a plan. Mitchell exchanged a glance with Shaw, who gave a small nod of encouragement. He sighed and turned to issue the orders. Within moments, 3 squadrons of human fighters peeled away from the main fleet, arming themselves with experimental EMP torpedoes designed to disable enemy systems without causing catastrophic explosions. Laura had been saving these weapons for a moment like this, a chance to cripple the Critheri without sacrificing her own ships. As the strike team approached the enemy formation, Laura watched anxiously from the bridge. The Critheri didn't seem to notice the small group of ships weaving through the chaos of the battlefield. Their attention was focused on the larger human vessels, which were holding steady under relentless barrages of missiles and plasma fire. The distraction was working perfectly. "Strike team in position," Shaw reported, her voice tinged with nervous excitement. "They're ready to launch the EMPs." Laura leaned forward, her hands gripping the railing tightly. "Do it," she ordered. The strike team fired their torpedoes in unison, sending streaks of blue energy hurtling toward the Critheri carriers. When the EMPs hit, the effect was immediate. Entire sections of the enemy fleet went dark, weapons powered down, shields collapsed, and engines sputtered to a halt. The once imposing carriers were now sitting ducks, vulnerable and exposed. "Now," Laura shouted, "all units, focus fire on the carriers." The human fleet sprang into action, unleashing everything they had left. Plasma torpedoes and laser cannons tore through the disabled carriers, reducing them to smoldering wrecks. One by one, the massive ships exploded, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The Critheri forces, deprived of their support network, began to falter. Fighters drifted aimlessly, their pilots unable to coordinate attacks. Larger warships tried to retreat, but the humans pursued relentlessly, picking them off one by one. On the bridge of the Invincible Asterisk, the crew erupted into cheers. For the first time since the battle began, victory seemed within reach. But Laura remained silent, her expression unreadable. She stared at the holographic display, watching as the Critheri fleet crumbled before her eyes. Each destroyed ship had a name, and she whispered them softly under her breath. The Asterisk Eternal Flame Asterisk, the Asterisk Stormcaller Asterisk, the Asterisk Vanguard's Wrath Asterisk. Naming them felt like a way to honor the lives lost to their cruelty, a reminder of why she fought so fiercely. But even as the tide turned in humanity's favor, the cost of the battle weighed heavily on her. Casualty reports flooded in from across the fleet. The Asterisk Defender Asterisk was gone, its crew lost in the initial wave. The Asterisk Sentry Asterisk had taken critical damage and was drifting helplessly in space. And then there was Lieutenant Shaw, who suddenly slumped over her console, blood trickling from a wound caused by shrapnel during the earlier chaos. "Medical team to the bridge," someone shouted. Laura rushed to Shaw's side, her heart pounding. "Hold on, Emily," she said firmly, pressing a cloth to the wound. "You're going to make it." Shaw managed a weak smile. "Just doing my job, Admiral." "Shields holding at 40%, reported an engineer, his voice strained. "We can't take another hit like that." Laura clenched her fists but kept her composure. She knew the Asterisk Iron Tempest Asterisk wouldn't stop until the Asterisk Invincible Asterisk was nothing more than floating debris. But she also knew its weakness, a vulnerable reactor core hidden deep within its armored hull. If they could disable it, the entire ship would go up in flames. "Target its rear quadrant," she ordered. "Focus all fire on the reactor shielding. We need to punch through before they recover." The gunnery teams obeyed without hesitation, unleashing a concentrated barrage of plasma torpedoes. The shots slammed into the Asterisk Iron Tempest Asterisk defenses, chipping away at its shields until finally the protective barrier collapsed. One torpedo struck true, piercing the reactor compartment. For a moment, there was silence, a heartbeat of anticipation, before the Asterisk Iron Tempest Asterisk erupted in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled outward, shaking the Asterisk Invincible Asterisk once more. Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Laura silenced them with a raised hand. "Stay focused," she said sharply. "This isn't over yet." She was right. Though the Asterisk Iron Tempest Asterisk was gone, hundreds of Critheri ships still remained. They regrouped quickly, forming a tight defensive formation around their largest carriers. These behemoths were heavily armored and bristling with weapons, making them nearly impossible to destroy outright. Worse, they began launching waves of drones and fighters, swarming the human fleet like insects. Laura studied the new formation carefully. Breaking through it would require more than brute force. It would take cunning and sacrifice. She glanced at the nebula nearby, its swirling gases glowing faintly in the distance. An idea began to form in her mind, risky but potentially devastating. "Lieutenant Shaw," she said, turning to the communications officer, "order Squadrons 5 and 6 to draw the enemy toward the nebula. Tell them to make it look like a retreat." Shaw blinked, surprised by the command. "A retreat, Admiral. Won't that expose our flank?" "It's not a real retreat," Laura explained. "We're baiting them into a trap. Once they're inside the nebula, we'll spring it." Mitchell frowned but didn't argue. He trusted Laura's instincts, even if the plan sounded dangerous. Within moments, the two squadrons broke off from the main fleet, firing wildly to create the illusion of panic. The Critheri commanders took the bait, ordering their forces to pursue. Dozens of ships surged into the nebula, their engines leaving faint trails of light against the colorful gas clouds. Laura watched them go, her expression unreadable. She tapped a sequence into the console, activating a series of hidden mines scattered throughout the nebula. When the timing was perfect, she gave the order: detonate. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. The volatile gases ignited instantly, creating a massive firestorm that engulfed the Critheri ships. Hundreds were destroyed in seconds, their burning hulks drifting aimlessly in the void. The survivors scrambled to retreat, their formation shattered. On the bridge of the Invincible Asterisk, the crew stared in stunned silence at the devastation they had unleashed. Laura exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. It was a victory, but she knew the cost of such tactics weighed heavily on everyone involved. Still, there was no time to rest. The battle was far from over, and the Critheri weren't done fighting. The ambush worked better than anyone could have hoped. The Critheri ships, believing the human fleet to be crippled, had rushed forward without caution. When the US Invincible Asterisk and its allies powered back up, their weapons roared to life, catching the enemy in a deadly crossfire. Plasma torpedoes and laser cannons tore through the Critheri ranks, leaving trails of burning wreckage in their wake. Explosions lit up the battlefield, each one a small sun that briefly illuminated the faces of the crew on the bridge. Admiral Laura Hayes stood at the center of it all, her eyes locked onto the tactical display. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations, predictions, and split-second decisions. Every move she made was deliberate, every order precise. She didn't allow herself to feel fear or doubt. Not now, not when so much depended on her leadership. Around her, the crew worked tirelessly, their movements sharp and efficient. Even Lieutenant Emily Shaw, usually calm and composed, was leaning forward in her seat, relaying orders with urgency as the battle unfolded. "Enemy dreadnought closing in," shouted an officer from the sensor station. "It's targeting the Invincible Asterisk." Laura turned toward the viewport just in time to see a massive Critheri warship emerge from the chaos. Its hull was scarred from previous battles, but its weapons still glowed with menacing energy. On the tactical display, Laura recognized it immediately. The Iron Tempest Asterisk, one of the most feared ships in the Critheri fleet. It had destroyed countless human vessels in the past, earning a reputation for ruthlessness. "Divert all available power to the forward shields," Laura commanded, her voice cutting through the noise on the bridge. "And prepare a counter-barrage. We're not letting that thing get close." Captain Ryan Mitchell nodded grimly and relayed the order to the engineering team. Moments later, the Invincible Asterisk shuddered as the Iron Tempest Asterisk unleashed a salvo of missiles. The impact rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from overloaded consoles. Officers stumbled but quickly regained their footing, determined to keep fighting. The bridge of the US Invincible Asterisk erupted into action as Admiral Laura Hayes' command echoed through the air. The first salvo of plasma torpedoes launched from the human fleet, streaking across the void like fiery arrows. The Critheri ships, caught slightly off guard by the sudden aggression, scrambled to respond. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as several enemy fighters were obliterated in an instant. The battle had begun. Laura stood at the center of the chaos, her gaze fixed on the holographic display that showed the positions of both fleets. Her mind raced, calculating angles, distances, and potential weaknesses in the enemy's formation. Beside her, Captain Ryan Mitchell barked orders to the gunnery teams, ensuring every shot counted. Lieutenant Emily Shaw, seated at the communication station, relayed updates from the other ships in the fleet, her voice steady despite the tension gripping the room. "Enemy reinforcements incoming," Shaw called out, her fingers flying over the controls. "They're deploying more fighters from the rear." Laura nodded, unfazed. This was exactly what she had anticipated. The Krithuri always relied on overwhelming numbers to crush their opponents, but they weren't prepared for someone who could think 3 steps ahead. "Ryan, order Squadrons 3 and 4 to flank them," she instructed. "Use the nebula to mask your approach." Mitchell hesitated for a split second before relaying the order. He trusted Laura's judgment, but the risks were enormous. The nebula's volatile gases could just as easily destroy their own ships if they got too close. Still, he knew better than to question her now. Every decision she made was deliberate, calculated down to the smallest detail. As the human squadrons moved into position, Laura turned her attention to the larger Krithuri vessels. These were the real threats, the massive dreadnoughts and carriers that could decimate entire fleets with a single barrage. She tapped a sequence into the console in front of her, pulling up detailed schematics of the enemy ships. Each one had a name, etched into her memory like scars on a soldier's skin. The Asterisk Shadow Blade Asterisk, the Asterisk Iron Tempest Asterisk, the Asterisk Eternal Flame Asterisk. She whispered them under her breath, her lips curling into a faint, grim smile. Knowing their names gave her power over them, a way to strip away their anonymity and make them feel mortal. "Admiral," Shaw interrupted, snapping Laura back to the present. "We've lost contact with the Asterisk Defender Asterisk. It looks like it took heavy damage during the initial wave." Laura's jaw tightened, but she didn't let emotion cloud her focus. Losses were inevitable in a fight like this. "Redirect medical drones to recover survivors," she said sharply, "and tell the rest of the fleet to tighten their formation. We can't afford any gaffes." Meanwhile, the flanking maneuver proved successful. Hidden within the swirling clouds of the nebula, Squadrons 3 and 4 emerged behind the Krithuri fighters, catching them completely off guard. Plasma cannons roared to life, tearing through the enemy ranks with devastating precision. Dozens of ships exploded in rapid succession, their fiery deaths illuminating the battlefield like fireworks. But the Krithuri weren't done yet. Their commanders quickly adapted, ordering their remaining forces to regroup and counterattack. Waves of missiles streaked toward the human fleet, forcing the defenders to scatter. Alarms blared across the Asterisk Invincible Asterisk as a few strays impacted its shields, sending shockwaves rippling through the hull. "Shield holding at 60%, reported an engineer from his station. "Keep them steady," Laura ordered, her voice calm but firm. She glanced at the tactical display again, searching for her next move. The Krithuri were trying to overwhelm them with sheer firepower, but they were also predictable. They always prioritized brute force over subtlety, a flaw Laura intended to exploit. "Lieutenant Shaw," she said, turning to the communications officer, "send a coded message to all units. Initiate Operation Blackout." Shaw's eyes widened slightly. Operation Blackout was a risky gambit, one that involved disabling the fleet's engines temporarily to create the illusion of system failure. If it worked, the Krithuri would assume the humans were vulnerable and charge straight into another trap. But if it failed, the fleet would be sitting ducks.